Welcome back to this special edition of Powering Our Community. Our next guest is Jacob Williams. Jacob is the CEO and General Manager of the Florida Municipal Power Agency, frequently called the Fmpa. Now, not many people in Leesburg know what the Fmpa is, but it's actually very important to the city of Leesburg because the Fmpa is where we purchase all of our wholesale power. Thanks for being here, Jacob.
Thank you, Dan. Great to be here.
So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about what is the Fmpa and what do they do?
Fmpa is a group of 31 municipalities that they're city-owned electric utilities, and Fmpa is a wholesale provider to many or most of those utilities. We provide the wholesale power, like to Leesburg. Leesburg then sells it to the individual cities. Our membership runs from northwest up in the Tallahassee, Havana area over to Jacksonville Beach, throughout Central Florida, all the way down to Homestead and Key West. So got communities big and small throughout the state of Florida.
Great, thanks for explaining that. And so you talked about generation a little bit, and one of the questions that I get from constituents is that, well, doesn't Leesburg just buy their power from Duke and mark it up? But you're saying that generation is what Fmpa does, so yeah. Speak a little bit about that.
The Fmpa, the members own the utility. So each city, like Leesburg, is an owner of the utility, and you own your share of all our power generation fleet, and we provide electricity from that fleet to Leesburg, as well as 12 other cities on a full basis, and other cities, another 6 to 10 on a part-time basis. And our generation fleet is made up of like 80% of our generations from natural gas, 15% from coal and declining, 5% from nuclear, and a small and growing piece from solar. And we distribute that to the cities who take all requirements, and other cities take parts and pieces from us as well.
Okay, great. So you mentioned the mix and how coal's declining, a lot of natural gas, and solar's kind of an up-and-coming generator. With clean energy being in the news a lot, how does the Fmpa's mix compare to, I don't know, maybe the U.S. or other providers in Florida?
On a national basis, Fmpa's mix is much heavier in clean natural gas, much lower than in coal than what you would see nationally. And our mix is growing in the renewable solar, because that's the only resource we have. In the state of Florida, we're about average. FPL provides 50% of the electricity in the state. We're very comparable to their mix. There are some that have a bit more coal. They're moving away from coal. We're going to finish off moving away from coal in the next 5 to 7 years as well.
Okay, great. With all the hurricanes in Florida, reliability is a big concern for a lot of people. How does the Fmpa stack up there, and what do they do to?
Yeah, and our role is to provide the wholesale power. So we start by looking at how reliable our fleet is to our member cities. And the backbone is gas generation is our low-cost mix. Far lower cost than coal, than nuclear, even than solar. And so our gas units are extremely high availability, like 92% availability. The average in the U.S. is around 85% availability. So the more generation we get from our gas fleet, the lower the costs are for our member cities, and thankfully we've done successful with that. That power is then passed to the cities, and the cities manage the day-to-day wires part of the business. So Leesburg, you have your own crews. The transmission is managed by Duke, FPL, and others. So when there's hurricanes, you're putting your own local service back here in Leesburg. If there's transmission system issues, it's FPL or Duke in this area that puts the transmission back in place in Seminole, and then you all do the last leg to get to the customers. And we help and support in designing some of the system and in helping response, but the day-to-day activity of the reliability is in the Leesburg Utilities' hands.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that. Now, you mentioned solar, and I know that the Fmpa now has one solar project that's completely up and running. I think it's another one in the works. Can you talk about those projects?
Yeah. We've been excited. This year, we had two solar projects, two sites that came online this year, and they're the first of 2 of 5. We'll have 3 more that come online in 2023. And so our communities are starting to get, I believe we have around 8 communities that are taking solar off of the phase 1 project. We'll have 13 or 14 communities when it's all said and done that are taking pieces from the solar. And one of the unique things about Fmpa is that each city decides which projects they want to participate in. And in solar, when we first got into it, the costs were much higher than our gas fleet. And so many of the cities said, don't want to go in the first wave of projects, which turned out to be a wise decision because the next wave of projects were much lower cost. They're still not as low cost as our gas fleet, but they're getting closer. And so there's another group of cities that's coming online, and we'll go from, this year, 1% of our energy from solar to about 3% in the next year or two, to in 2023 we'll be at 7% of our energy from solar. And then we'll probably look at doing some other projects. So there's opportunities for cities who aren't involved, because a number haven't been involved, they can step in the future. And frankly, probably the cost will be lower at that point in time.
Okay, yeah, great. And I know that's kind of where Leesburg is. For the viewers that don't know, when the first solar came out, the Fmpa did a study where they actually surveyed residents of different cities, and the residents of Leesburg came back that they just weren't very interested in solar if they had to pay more several years ago. So we elected not to do that, but now as costs are coming down, that's something that probably will at some point be in Leesburg's future. And it's great to know that through the Fmpa we have the ability to pick and choose what's right for Leesburg.
Sure.
So now you mentioned not quite as cheap as gas. I saw some of the news last week where the IEA said solar is the cheapest energy in the history of the world. But that doesn't, maybe a little misleading?
If you compared building a brand new facility today, a new gas plant, to solar in this part of the country, solar would probably be lower cost, assuming you don't need 100% reliability. But all of our gas plants are already on the ground, so you're not paying for the capital anymore. It's just variable cost of putting fuel in. And in that case, the gas plants are far cheaper to run than building new solar. Mm-hmm. But we're adding increments of solar because some of our communities wanted that as part of the mix. You talked about one of the interesting things we surveyed back in 2016 was customers are interested in solar, like 70%. And then you ask them the second question, the more important one, are you willing to pay a lot more for solar? And that number drops to about 10% of the customers, which tells us something we intuitively know here in Florida. Price of electricity is really important to customers, far more than the source. And so there's a group of customers who will pay a bit more. And some of our cities are offering opportunities for customers to pay more so they can get 100% of their power from solar. But for the other customers, they don't want to pay anything more, and they like low cost is the winner. And so we have to be keenly focused on both cost as well as on a smaller group who says, I'm really worried about wanting 100% solar. And so we try to balance that for each of our cities.
Right, and I think another thing here in Florida is with, despite being the sunshine state, we have a lot of cloudy days. So if you wanted to go truly 100% solar, you're going to have a lot of battery storage that maybe the technology is not quite there yet.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges you have is in everybody thinks of Florida as the sunshine state, and while there are a lot of days where there are sun during the day, just like today, it's cloudy, and Florida is 20-30% less sunny than Arizona, for example. And yet they think they're the same, and they're not even close. And everyone who lives here in the summer knows we get rains every afternoon, and right when you need the power the most, quite often it's not there. And so you need to have batteries not only for the middle of the day, but for all the hours in the evening and around the clock. And there are 4 or 5 days in a row where you may not have solar energy. You have to have batteries. So the technology's there. It's how much you want to pay. If you want to pay 4 or 5 times the price of electricity, guarantee 100% solar and battery, you can do that. But that means taking bills from averaging $100 to $400 or $500 a month. By the time you stack up all the batteries and you go, there aren't many people who really want to pay that kind of price of electricity.
Right. So the message on solar is that it's getting cheaper.
Yes.
And it's going to become a larger part of our mix, but it's not there today to take over as the primary source.
It is not when you consider the average customer doesn't want to pay extra for their power.
Right.
And if people said, hey, I want to double my price of electricity, we could add a lot more solar. But most customers don't want to pay double the price of electricity. They say they don't even want to pay $5 or $10 more a month,
right,
let alone $100 more a month.
Okay.
So that's the trade-off we make.
Well, that's good to know. Thank you for clearing that up. So I know the Fmpa does a lot of other things. So other than just obviously the primary thing being generating power
Yeah.
for the members. What are some of the other services that you provide to the member cities?
Our major themes are low cost, reliable, and clean. And so not only is the mix that we worry about cost, and I'll come back to that in a minute, and reliable, but the clean part. And we've made significant reductions in terms of emissions from our portfolio. If you think about our nitric oxide, the ozone, and sulfur dioxide emissions have dropped by like 80–90% in the last 15 years.
Wow.
At the same time, our CO2 footprint is going to be cut in half from 2005 till 2027, which is a huge reduction, moving off of coal to more gas and that. So those are the main things we do. Then there are all the services that cities want that say, hey, we're not big enough to have extra engineering support or IT support and some of these things. We can provide many of the assistance and opportunity where they can have an expert available to them at a moment's notice, like it's a larger organization, even though Leesburg that may only have 25, 50 people inside, and yet they have resources, access to resources who can help. Hey, here's been our experience in designing a substation. Here are the things you think about. Or how do I improve reliability in this area? We can have people who have traveled the state, if not the nation, and can help improve in those things. And those are frankly done at minimal to no cost to the members. And we've got 31 cities that we work around, so we get a lot of experience doing that.
Okay, great. Yeah, in fact, earlier now I talked about the reliability and how we were able to restore power, faster after the hurricane than some of the IOUs, the investor-owned utilities, were. Yep. And I know, though, it's something we're always trying to improve. And I believe the Fmpa just helped us with the reliability assessment and came in and looked at some things we're doing and gave us some recommendations. Yeah,
we go around, and a lot of times it's what we call experiential consulting, where we can look at the systems and say, here are the big items that need to be improved from the thing, and give you a punch list to work on. And then from there you decide to work through, and many of our cities have done that and continue to make improvement. Is it better tree trimming programs? Is it better pole replacements? The wood poles in Florida aren't going to last but 40 years or less, and you got to stay on top of that. Is it better fuse coordination to where you're not taking off the entire circuit from the center of the city out, you're taking off just the last few customers when a squirrel gets in the line, and making sure those devices work the way they're supposed to minimize outages. As you said, one of the interesting things is the municipal and electric utilities do a much better job of recovering from the major storms than the larger IOUs and others in the area, because when there's an outage or a hurricane here, your team goes to work on Leesburg. They don't go to work on 50 miles from here. Your team goes and focuses on Leesburg. Your response time is almost immediate. And so you get customers back rapidly when things happen, and you look at the data, and after every hurricane, customers in municipals are back a day to two sooner than the average customer is not on a municipal system. And so that's a great benefit to the customers that Leesburg has that same advantage as well.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a lot of really great stuff the Fmpa is doing, but just so our viewers don't think that this is all causing their power bills to be higher. Earlier, Al and I talked about the steps that Leesburg's taken internally to reduce our electric rate. And while a lot of it has come from internal components, a big part's come from actually the Fmpa and your reduction in power costs. You want to talk about that?
Sure. What's interesting is the power cost to Leesburg from Fmpa is lower today than it was all the way back in 2005.
Wow.
So we've went 15 years and we have lower costs today than 2005. Go think about anything you buy. Is there anything that's cheaper today than it was? There's been a lot of work, a lot of great work by the teams. The plants are running well. We're shifted to natural gas. So as a result, this past year we saw basically an 8 or 9% reduction in power costs. The first time the power cost in Leesburg has been below $70 a megawatt hour, 7 cents a kilowatt hour, since '04. And the team's done a number of great things, whether it's working on the financing to lower cost, buying gas in different ways to drive costs down in that. And so we're quite proud of that we've enabled cities to be able to offer very low rates to their customers. And if you look at the wholesale power bill, the bill from us is probably 70% of all the cost to Leesburg Electric Utility comes from us.
Right.
And so our team is keenly aware of how important that is. one of the things that we always like to point out to our communities is if you look at Florida, and Leesburg is probably a nice microcosm of Florida. People in Florida use more electricity than the average customers in the United States. It's hot and humid. We use about 25% more. We use twice as much electricity per person as does California or New York. So that means that we use twice as much. Price is really important. And yet our prices are well below California and New York, like almost half of the prices that you see out there. And so we're quite proud of saying, look, that's important. The other thing to remember is that in Florida, the average income is below the U.S. average. We have a lot of fixed income retirees that come into the area, have a lot of low income, normal amount of low income. So the average income is below the U.S. average, and yet we have about a third of the customers in Florida pay 10% of their after-tax disposable income to pay the electric bill. So we always talk to our team about what we do at Fmpa, driving costs down, affects roughly 2 million Floridians. They're never going to see them or thank them, but if we do our job right, they're going to have more disposable income in the customers' pockets, and that includes Leesburg, where your customers today have lower electric bills than they did in 05.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I think I just like to point out one other thing. So Fmpa, because it's member-owned,
yep.
There are no shareholders. I mean, it's the members. So you're not.
You are the shareholder.
Right, we are the shareholders.
The city of Leesburg is one of the shareholders.
Yeah. And so the benefit of that is, if you look at, for instance, one of the investor-owned utilities in our area is, of course, is Duke.
Right.
Well, Duke pays their shareholders a 4% dividend a year.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at just the amount that Leesburg purchases, that's like $2.6 million a year. Yeah. That basically that we can keep here either through lower power or money going back to the city because we don't have because we are the shareholder. So
that's right.
I think that's another really key benefit to municipal power that often gets overlooked.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because what's great about our board decisions, I mean, you have your team there, Brad and Jim Williams, and then Al, who sits behind as city manager. They're voting on things that directly impact their customers' cost. And it's a simple thing to think about. How does it affect our cost? If it increases it, probably don't like it. If it decreases it, wonderful thing. There's no alternative motive like how can we get money to the shareholders. The city is the shareholder, and the customers are the shareholder, so to speak.
Right.
And they're the only stakeholders we worry about, which is a great thing.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate all this information. I think people will learn a lot about what the Fmpa is, what the benefits that it provides Leesburg. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I guess I would add that the future is bright for Leesburg. Prices were high in the 2009-10, and things have come down. We're in a position now to deliver low-cost power for the next 7-8 years to Leesburg, to where prices stay relatively flat through this time. We've said they've stayed there as low today as they were in 05. We can continue that trend for the next 5 to 7 years. At the same time, we can keep reducing emissions and not see price increases. A very interesting opportunity for us to do the blocking and tackling well and provide a reliable power. So it's a neat opportunity that's before us. Going to take a lot of work, but ultimately the ownership that Leesburg has in this, it's going to pay huge dividends while many of the other utilities around here are filing rate increases next year. Duke and FPL are both set to file some pretty significant retail rate increases. You, on the other hand, probably not so much, and so it's an opportunity for the city to take advantage of the value the utility provides the city, and whether it's investing in the electric system, lowering rates, or frankly doing other things with the city money. That you guys make that decision. That's your council decision, but we hope to put you in a position where you have that joyful problem to have.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. It is a great problem to have, and we did reduce our rates this year, and based on these conversations, and when you look at the market, I think that that's something that customers should be able to look forward to in the future as well. So, Jacob, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Hope you've enjoyed this special on Powering Our Community. Until next time, I'm City Commissioner Dan Roebuck. Thanks.